guys, and welcome to this video. I'm Ellen and I am here to review some books. We're mainly going to talk about the books that I read in the month of January, which actually was a pretty decent reading month, I'd say. I read a total of 5 books. I was trying to read 6, but I only got to 5. So we're only going to talk about the 5. This year I kind of want to do something different with these videos. I want to do a few stats or statistics because I really like seeing statistics in other people's videos, so I want to do the same. As I already showed you, I read 5 books, and all of these books are different genres and they're all pretty much like different age groups too. So let's start with the age groups. I read 1 children's book, 1 young adult, and 3 adult books. And then genre-wise, I read 1 fantasy, 1 classic, because that is my goal. One of my goals for this year is to read a classic a month. Then I've read 1 play, I read a dystopian, and I read a romance. Stars-wise, I read 1 2.5 star book, I read a 3-star, 1 3.5, and 2 5 stars. Pages-wise, the longest book I read is 759 pages, and then the shortest book that I read was 214 pages. But total, I read 2,084 pages, which kind of averages out to 67 pages a day, which to me isn't that great. So I'm going to try and do better for February, because I do want to read a lot more. I have a lot of books I want to read in February. So far, I am slacking. Another stat we could do is the gender of the authors. So I read 3 female authors and 2 male authors. That's all I can think of to do for stats right now. So let's start talking about the books. This year I want to do something different. I want to talk about the books in order of star ratings. So I want to start from the lowest star rating to the highest star rating. So my least favorite book to my favorite book. I think that's how we're going to do it this year. So my lowest rated book is As You Like It by William Shakespeare. I'm so upset by this because I remember reading this, so this is technically a reread, but it was so long ago that I kind of forgot what it was about and what I even thought about the book. But I just remember back in high school when I read this, I really liked this book. I really liked this play. But reading it back now, I don't really like it. It's not my favorite of his when it used to be my favorite of his. I don't know why I picked this book up. I picked up a couple Shakespeare plays. So I'm kind of on a Shakespeare kick right now. I kind of want to read a bunch of Shakespeare, so I might try and read 1 Shakespeare play a month as well. It's a new goal of mine. And the one I'm holding in my hand, by the way, is the No Fear Shakespeare edition. I actually really like these editions of Shakespeare's plays because I have a little difficulty understanding Shakespeare unless someone explains it to me, and No Fear Shakespeare explains it very well to me. They basically have the Shakespeare text on one side and then modern English on the other side. So I read the Shakespeare version and I try to come up with what I think it's saying, and then I read the modern English, and sometimes I'm wrong, sometimes I'm right. So in this play, oh my goodness, we have so many characters. That was one of my biggest things, and that's also, I know, that's one of the things that Shakespeare does with all of his plays, but there's just too many characters. So mainly, we're just going to talk about the characters that I feel should be talked about. So we have Rosalind, whose father was banished by the king, who is her uncle, but she got to stay in the kingdom because she is really close with her cousin, aka the king's daughter. Then she ends up getting banished, so she decides to disguise herself as a man, so that way the king doesn't catch her. But then the cousin decides to go with her, and she kind of dresses in disguise a little bit, but she's still a girl. And yet they still leave the kingdom. I don't know why they decide to do the banishment, but just in disguise. And they decide to bring their jester with them. Whatever. And then there's also this guy Orlando, who the king doesn't like as well because of his father. I can't remember. I think his father was banished too. There's lots of banishment happening. But he meets Rosalind as a lady, falls instantly in love with her, and then tries to find her and keeps running into Rosalind as a man. that's essentially like the main part of the play, but there's so much other like romance drama going on. So yeah, like I said, there were too many characters in this play. We could have taken out a couple of them and it would have been so much better. We could have developed the characters a little bit more if we had taken out some unnecessary characters. Also, there were a lot of things that like characters did where there was not a lot of explanation as to why they're doing it, like the whole banishing thing. Like when the king banished Rosalind, there was legit no reason. He was just like, I decided to change my mind. You're banished now. I was like, what? And then also at the end, the king did something else I don't want to say in case you feel like reading it, where he just like randomly changed his mind about something, but like didn't really give any reason for it. It was, I don't know, there was like a lot of that going on where people just like did things with not a whole lot of explanation. That ending also too just wrapped up way too quickly and way too neatly. Like, way too neatly. It is a very light and breezy play. Like, there's not a lot of sustenance to it, so it is actually very easy to understand. Even like the Shakespeare part was easy to understand. This might be best seen physically because it is a comedy. This one probably wasn't that great to just read on its own. You may have to actually physically see it to really understand it, not understand it, but like get the gist of it and maybe get the most out of it. I did really actually enjoy the monologue at the end. I actually really enjoyed that part of the ending. But overall, wasn't my favorite, but it was enjoyable. So I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars. The next one I've got here is the classic that I read, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. So with this book we have 3 main characters. We have Dorian Gray, we have Basil Hallward, and we have Lord Henry. Dorian Gray is the most like beautiful man ever, but he doesn't know it. And Basil Hallward is like a painter who is painting Dorian Gray, and when he paints Dorian Gray, he's like, you are the most beautiful man in the world, blah, blah, blah. So Dorian is like, oh my god, I am so beautiful. And while this painting is happening, he meets Basil's friend, Lord Henry, and they end up having a lot of like philosophical discussions, and Dorian finds Lord Henry like super fascinating with like his view and take on the world. So anyway, Dorian Gray now finds himself super attractive and thinks that that's all that matters in the world is attractiveness, and he takes the painting home, and the painting ends up growing older, and the real Dorian Gray just ends up staying beautiful and like not growing and just looking the same. It's just kind of about like vanity and the consequences of that, I guess. I don't know. I was a little bit confused here and there when reading this. It is a super slow-paced book. I will say I do tend to like faster-paced books. This was very slow-paced, so it did take me a little while to read it. This definitely, I think, needed to be a slow-paced book, though. There was, I feel like, a lot of inner monologues and outer monologues that were just like super long and would get super like boring to me. Not all of it was boring, but there were a lot of parts that were quite boring to me, and I was just like, can we get to like something interesting now? I don't know, I just feel like the way it was written just didn't really capture my attention the whole time. Also, the passage of time was super confusing, because I remember by the time we like got towards the end, I thought maybe like 6 months had gone by or like a year had gone by, but then someone says 18 years ago, and I was like, wait, 18 years has gone by? So the passage of time was super confusing to me. I do think that this book is very thought-provoking and like philosophical, and I really did enjoy the conversations between Lord Henry and Dorian, and I liked the character arc of Dorian Gray. I thought he had a really great character development. How he went from this like super naive boy who doesn't really know anything to who he is as an adult, and it was just very fascinating, and I loved the ending. I thought the ending was like a perfect ending for this book. I enjoyed that a lot, but it just took like a good 2/3 of the way to get to the really fascinating and interesting parts. I also I don't know if anyone else notices this, but I feel like a lot of people do if they're reading it nowadays. But there was a lot of sexual tension between the three main characters. Like, they were all, like, super attracted to each other, but that, like, part of the book wasn't elaborated on, and I think that's because of the time period it was written in. So I enjoyed parts of this book, but not a whole lot of it, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The next book is In the Afterlight by Alexandra Bracken. This is the 3rd and final book in the Darkest Minds trilogy. I think that's what it's being called. It was okay. Wasn't too bad. So I don't want to explain the premise of this book just because it is the last book in a series, but The Darkest Minds, which is the first book in the series, which I do recommend you read the series. I think it's fun, even though it's not the best. We're in this world where children have been infected with something and they either die from it or they survive, but they come out with like superpowers. And there's 5 different types of powers. So they've categorized them by color, and so you are called that color with whatever power you have. And we follow Ruby, who is the most dangerous of the colors. She is an orange. She has like telepathic power, so she can like make people do things with her mind, and she can read people's memories. She can't hear their thoughts. That should have been something that they could have done. But she can like see people's memories. She can manipulate people's memories. It's a very cool power, I must say. But the adults are like terrified of the kids, so they put the kids into concentration camps, and Ruby ends up making them think that she is a green, which is the lowest of the powers, like the not threatening of the powers. But then she gets broken out by a group of people who are trying to take down the government and trying to get rid of these camps because they're actually terrible and they're treating the kids terribly. And it's just kind of like that whole story, just trying to change people's minds about kids with powers and trying to take down the government because it's evil. Typical young adult dystopian stuff going on. The final conclusion was okay. I thought, it was the same situation as with Never Fade, where the beginning was super slow and was just kind of like, let's get to it, let's get there. So the ending was really great, really fast paced. I loved it. The beginning just it took a while to get me into the story. I liked the ending in a sense where it felt realistic, like things weren't wrapped up super neatly, like there's still progress happening, but at least that there is now progress. But something I didn't like about the ending was that there were, even though not everything like was wrapped up neatly, there were things that didn't have like any wrap up at all. Like there are some things I still have questions about, some things that just don't quite add up. Mainly the one I want to know is what happened to Sam. Like, is she okay? So it wasn't wrapped up neatly, but there were still things that I feel like could have been wrapped up better. I loved the characters in this book really evolved from the first book to the 3rd book. They evolved very well and very realistically with what the situations that they were in. I do enjoy the side characters way more than the main characters. Like, I don't mind the main characters. I know some people really have issues with the main characters. I don't mind them. I just really enjoy the side characters more than them, and I wish we were following Chubbs throughout this whole series instead of Ruby. There were a good amount of deaths in this book. I'm not going to say who dies, but we do have a good amount of deaths. With the 2nd book, there was like a specific death that happened that made me cry so hard because it was like one of my favorite characters. And in this one, another one of my like all-time favorite characters dies. We have a bunch of like deaths, but the one that dies, I thought I was going to like cry over it, but I didn't, and I think it's because we moved way too quickly past the death. I just feel like the deaths weren't as impactful as they could have been if we had taken the time to really like take in these characters' deaths. I did also predict a good amount of what was going to happen in the book. Not everything, but I did predict a good amount of things before they happened. But that actually didn't take away from my enjoyment because it was what I wanted to happen, so it is what happened. I enjoyed it, but not a whole lot. Like, it's not the greatest thing in the world. It's not the greatest series, but it is a very fun series if you plan on reading it. So I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. Now we're on to the 5-star books. The first of the 5-star books is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows by J.K. Rowling. This is the 7th and final book in the Harry Potter series. I don't know if I really need to say anything about this book. I feel like I am the last person on earth to read Harry Potter. I don't think I really need to say much about this, except it was a really great conclusion and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I don't think there's anything left to be said of Harry Potter. Everything's already been said. And then the last book I'm here to show you is actually the first book that I read in this year of 2019, and it was my favorite book that I've read in this month, and who knows, it might make it in my top 10 because it was really good. And that is Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is actually a very interesting concept of a book too, and it's something I've always wondered about my own life. We follow Hannah, whose life is not really that great. Like, her love life sucks, her career life sucks, she keeps moving from place to place to place and never really stays in one place. So she ends up moving back home to Los Angeles, and she goes out one night with her friend Gabby, and she runs into her ex-boyfriend from high school, the one that got away or whatever. But by the end of this night, she can either decide to stay with her ex-boyfriend at the bar and like continue talking with him and then he'll drop her off, or she can leave with her friend. And this book follows both those timelines. So what happens when she goes home with her friend and what happens when she stays with her ex-boyfriend. And it basically just asks, it gives like, not really like answers, but it kind of explores the questions that I'm going to read from the back because the questions are perfect. But like, is anything meant to be? How much in our lives is determined by chance? And perhaps most compellingly, is there such a thing as a soulmate? It's very fascinating, and it's told in both different timelines, and you go back and forth between the timelines, and I thought that would be confusing, but it actually was not confusing at all. I was able to know exactly what timeline we were in from the beginning of the chapter. It was very well done, and there were a lot of huge like shockers that happened that I was not expecting. Again, I really enjoyed the writing of this book. Like, Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing is just amazing, and I really loved it. This was another very like thought-provoking book too, and it was so addictive and so hard to put down. And if you know me, if you've been watching these videos for a while, you know I really love books that have a lot of different emotions in them that like make me feel everything. So this has that. You have like, you know, you laugh, you cry, you get angry at times. You just really feel for the character and you fall in love. Oh my god, with this book. I fell in love. Something else I really enjoyed about the writing and really enjoyed about this book was that at the end of every chapter there was like a cliffhanger, and you had to wait until you got back to that timeline to know what happened, which was another reason why it was so addictive and so hard to put down. Something I really enjoyed too was that sometimes the same things would happen in both timelines, but they happened differently and the characters got different things out of it within the different timelines. I thought that was like very interesting. It's so complex. There's like so much going on in this book and the characters are very relatable, and I really truly loved this book. I give it 5 out of 5 stars. So that is it for the books that I read in January. Please go look down below because I also have a movie wrap up as well as just like a life wrap up where I talk about some things that I liked, songs that I liked, TV shows that I liked, like whatever. So go check those out as well, and don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys soon with more videos. Bye.